You'll be amazed by who is thinking about you today. My beloved child, today is not an ordinary day. And this is not an ordinary message. Because while you were going about your life unaware and unprepared, a powerful thought has been circling around you, returning again and again to the same place. And that place is you. Someone's mind keeps drifting back to your name, your face, your energy. Even when they try to distract themselves, even when they pretend they have moved on, they wake up with a strange heaviness, and they do not understand why. Because the first thing that crosses their mind is you. They scroll, they work, they speak to others, but your presence interrupts their thoughts like an unfinished sentence that refuses to end. This person did not plan to think about you today. Yet here they are pulled back by something deeper than logic, something that feels unavoidable. What makes this moment shocking is not just that they are thinking of you, but the reason behind it. A reason that will soon change how you see the past, the present, and what is quietly approaching. There is a moment today when this person pauses, staring into nothing, replaying memories they thought were buried. They remember the version of themselves they were before you entered their life and the version they became after. They realize something unsettling, something they have avoided admitting, that you were not just a chapter. You were a turning point. They compare everyone else to you without meaning to. And every comparison falls short. This realization hits them suddenly, almost painfully, because it exposes a truth they tried to ignore. Losing you was not just losing a person. It was losing a sense of direction. They begin to understand that the silence between you was never peace. It was denial. And today that denial cracks. The shock for them is realizing that you are not easily replaceable and you never were. The surprise for you will be learning just how deeply this understanding is shaking them right now. As the day moves forward, their thoughts grow heavier, more focused, more intense. They replay conversations, moments, and decisions, especially the ones where they chose pride, fear, or confusion over honesty. They recognize the exact moment things shifted, the moment they should have spoken, should have stayed, should have fought harder. This awareness does not bring comfort. It brings regret. They feel it in quiet moments when no one is watching. When there is no performance to maintain. They wonder if you have changed, if you are happier, stronger, more distant. And here is the part that will amaze you. They fear that you may no longer need them. And that fear unsettles them more than losing you ever did. The idea that you might be thriving without them forces them to confront how much power you still hold in their heart. Later today, something small triggers a much bigger emotional response in them. It could be a song, a place, a random word, or even a fleeting smell, but it opens a floodgate they were not ready for. They realize that no matter how much time has passed, their feelings did not disappear. They only went quiet. They start questioning their current choices, their current connections, and whether they settled for comfort instead of truth. In this moment, they acknowledge that thinking about you is not weakness. It is honesty. They begin to understand that you represented something real, something rare, something they were not mature enough to protect at the time. This realization is uncomfortable, humbling, and deeply emotional. And while you go about your day unaware, this internal shift is happening, silently, powerfully, and without your involvement. Before the day ends, they reach a conclusion that surprises even them. They accept that you left a permanent mark on their life, one that no distraction can erase. They feel an urge to reconnect, to understand where you stand, to know if there is still space for them in your world. Even if that thought scares them, whether they act on it or not is still uncertain. Clears throat, but the realization itself is irreversible. You are not forgotten. You, clears throat, are not insignificant. And you are not just a memory. You are the thought that keeps returning. The question that remains unanswered, and the truth they can no longer ignore. This is only the beginning of what is unfolding. And what comes next will reveal even more about why today out of all days you are on their mind. My beloved child, as the hours pass, the weight of their thoughts does not fade. It deepens. Because once a truth is acknowledged, it cannot be unseen. They begin to notice patterns that disturb them. How every meaningful conversation they have seems to circle back to qualities you embodied effortlessly. Your honesty, your depth, your way of understanding things without needing them to be explained twice. They realize they have been living with substitutes, with echoes, with fragments that never quite form a whole. This realization does not come gently. It arrives like a quiet storm, slow but overwhelming. They feel exposed to themselves, stripped of the stories they told to justify walking away, and what shocks them most is that you did not need to stay to remain powerful. Your absence taught them more than your presence ever did. Today that lesson lands fully and it leaves them unsettled, reflective, and deeply aware that something rare slipped through their fingers. Throughout the day, they find themselves imagining scenarios they once dismissed. They imagine what life would feel like if they had chosen courage instead of avoidance. They imagine conversations they never allowed to happen. They imagine the version of themselves that could have grown alongside you instead of apart from you. These thoughts do not bring peace. They bring a sharp clarity that cuts through illusion. They realize that timing was never the real issue. Readiness was, and readiness came too late. This understanding humbles them. They see now that you were not asking for perfection. You were asking for presence. You were not demanding certainty. You were offering growth. The shock is realizing how simple it was, and how complicated they made it. That awareness follows them relentlessly from moment to moment, refusing to be silenced. At some point they catch themselves wondering if you ever think of them too. And this question stirs something vulnerable and frightening. They realize they are no longer certain of their place in your life and that uncertainty is new for them. Once they assumed you would always be there, patient, understanding, waiting. Today they sense that assumption was a mistake. They imagine you evolving, becoming stronger, more self-assured, more selective. And the possibility that you may have outgrown them creates a quiet panic they cannot escape. This is where regret turns into longing. Not the shallow kind, but the deep awareness that something meaningful was mishandled. They understand now that love is not proven by intention alone but by action, consistency and courage. And today that truth feels heavy. As evening approaches, their emotions become more introspective, more raw. They stop blaming circumstances and start accepting responsibility. They acknowledge that walking away was easier than facing their own fears. They see how you mirrored parts of themselves they were not ready to confront. Your strength highlighted their hesitation. Your clarity exposed their confusion. Instead of rising to meet you, they retreated. This realization does not come with excuses anymore. It comes with accountability. They understand now that losing you was not fate. It was a choice. And that choice carries consequences that cannot be undone by regret alone. This awareness changes how they view their past and, more importantly, how they view themselves. Before the night settles completely, they sit with one final truth that feels both painful and transformative. Thinking about you today was not random. It was necessary. It was a reminder of what authenticity feels like, of what connection should be, of what they once had and did not fully value. Whether they reach out or remain silent, something within them has shifted, permanently. You are no longer just someone they miss. You are the standard by which they measure truth, depth, and emotional courage. And as this realization settles in, it quietly sets the stage for what is yet to come. Because when awareness reaches this level, it rarely ends without action. What happens next will reveal just how deeply today has changed everything. My beloved child, there is a shift that happens after midnight, a quiet hour when defenses fall and truth speaks louder than distraction. And tonight, that shift reaches them fully. When the world goes silent and no one is watching, they finally admit something they have avoided for far too long. You were never just someone they cared about. You were the mirror that reflected who they could have become. This realization does not come gently. It arrives with clarity so sharp that it leaves no room for denial. They understand now that thinking about you today was not coincidence. It was correction. Something within them is recalibrating, realigning, forcing them to face the cost of their choices. They feel the distance between who they are and who they might have been if they had stayed aligned with you. That distance feels unbearable tonight. And in this moment, they are not proud. They are honest. And honesty changes everything. As these thoughts deepen, they begin revisiting moments they once dismissed as ordinary. The way you listened without judgment. The way you spoke truth without cruelty. The way your presence made silence feel safe instead of awkward. They see now that those moments were rare, even sacred, and they treated them as if they were replaceable. This understanding stings because they realize how casually they walked away from something meaningful. They replay the last conversation. The last glance, the last moment when everything could have shifted in a different direction. They notice details they ignored before. The hesitation in your voice, the patience in your eyes, the quiet hope you carried. These memories return not to comfort them but to teach them, and the lesson is clear. What they lost was not accidental. It was chosen. That awareness settles heavily and it stays. At some point during the night they confront a fear they have never allowed themselves to name. The fear that you have moved beyond them in ways they cannot follow. They imagine you living a fuller life, one where your laughter is lighter, your boundaries stronger, your self-worth unshakable. They realize that you may no longer be available in the way you once were emotionally or energetically. This thought unsettles them deeply, not because they want to possess you, but because they recognize that you no longer need validation from someone who once withheld it. This is where admiration mixes with regret. They respect your growth yet mourn their absence from it. They understand now that you were never meant to wait. You were meant to rise. And tonight that truth humbles them. As the hours stretch on, they face the quiet question they can no longer avoid. What if they had shown up differently? What if they had chosen vulnerability over control? What if they had trusted the connection instead of doubting it? These questions do not seek answers anymore. They seek accountability. They realize that love is not proven by how strongly you feel but by how bravely you act. They see now that you asked for consistency and they offered uncertainty. You asked for honesty and they offered silence. This understanding does not make them feel small. It makes them aware. And awareness once awakened demands change. Whether that change reaches you or not remains unknown, but internally something irreversible has begun. As dawn approaches, a final clarity settles within them. Calm yet undeniable. Thinking about you today was not about the past. It was about the future they almost chose and the standard you set without trying. You became the reference point for depth, sincerity, and emotional courage. They understand now that connections like yours do not appear often, and when they do, they leave a permanent imprint. You are not just a memory revisited. You are a lesson integrated. And as this realization anchors itself within them, it quietly prepares the ground for what may come next. Because when a person reaches this level of truth, they rarely remain silent for long. The next step, whatever it may be, will reveal just how powerful today truly was. My beloved child, morning arrives, but rest does not, because the truth they faced in the night refuses to loosen its grip. With daylight comes clarity, and clarity is uncomfortable when it exposes what was once hidden. They move through their routine, distracted, outwardly calm, but inwardly shaken. Because every ordinary moment now carries an echo of you. They realize that thinking about you yesterday opened a door they cannot close today. Something inside them has shifted from reflection to resolve. Not impulsive resolve, but the heavy, deliberate kind that follows deep awareness. They understand that ignoring this feeling would be easier, but easier has already cost them too much, and now the weight of that realization follows them everywhere, pressing gently but persistently against their conscience. As the day unfolds, they begin to recognize a pattern that surprises them. Every time they chose comfort over truth, they lost something meaningful. Every time they avoided discomfort, they delayed growth. And every time they walked away from you emotionally, they walked away from their own potential. This awareness does not come with self-pity. It comes with responsibility. They see now that you were not asking them to complete you. You were inviting them to evolve with you. That invitation still lingers in their mind, unanswered but unforgettable. They realize how rare it is to encounter someone who challenges you to be better simply by being themselves. And today that realization carries a quiet urgency they cannot ignore. At some point they imagine your life as it is now, not as it was then. They picture you calmer, more grounded, less willing to settle for uncertainty. they sense that you no longer explain your worth to those who hesitate. This image both inspires and frightens them. It inspires them because it proves that growth is possible. It frightens them because it reminds them that access to you is no longer guaranteed. They understand that if they were to reach out, it could not be from nostalgia or guilt. It would have to come from sincerity, accountability, and change. This thought forces them to confront a difficult truth. Wanting you is not enough, being worthy of your presence is the real challenge. As hours pass, they feel a growing tension between fear and courage. Fear warns them of rejection, of silence, of the possibility that you may have closed a chapter they are only now ready to read properly. Courage reminds them that silence is what caused the loss in the first place. They remember how often they waited for the right moment, not realizing that the right moment was always honesty. This internal conflict does not feel dramatic. It feels real. They are no longer romanticizing the past. They are evaluating themselves. They are asking whether they are willing to show up differently, consistently, and without expectation. That question does not have an easy answer, but it has an honest one, and honesty is where change begins. By the end of the day, one truth stands taller than the rest. Thinking about you was not meant to pull them backward. It was meant to push them forward. Whether that forward movement includes you or not remains uncertain, but what is certain is that you awakened something within them that will not go back to sleep. You reminded them of depth in a shallow world, of intention in a distracted life, of connection that asks for courage instead of convenience. And as this understanding settles in, it becomes clear that what started as a thought has now become a turning point. What happens next will not be accidental. It will be shaped by the choices they are finally ready to make. My beloved child, there is a moment, subtle yet powerful, when intention begins to outweigh fear. And that moment finds them now. They no longer ask why they are thinking about you because the answer has settled deep within them. It is not curiosity. It is recognition. They recognize that you represent a version of truth they have not allowed themselves to live fully. This realization sharpens their awareness of time, of how quickly moments pass, of how easily meaningful connections can be lost when courage is delayed. Today that awareness feels urgent. They sense that if they do nothing, they will carry this regret quietly for years. And that thought is heavier than any possible outcome of action. This is where hesitation weakens and resolve begins to form. As they reflect further, they see clearly the difference between attachment and connection. Attachment was comfort, familiarity, routine. Connection was depth, growth, and accountability. You offered connection. They offered avoidance. This contrast becomes undeniable. They understand now that what unsettled them about you was not your intensity, but the way your presence demanded honesty. You saw through their excuses without trying. You felt their inconsistencies even when they smiled. That level of awareness frightened them then. Now it inspires them. They realize that thinking about you today is not about reclaiming the past. It is about aligning with a truth they have postponed for too long. At some point they imagine a conversation that has not yet happened. Not a dramatic one, not a desperate one, a grounded, honest exchange where words are no longer used to protect ego, but to express clarity. They imagine telling you what they failed to say before. Not promises, not justifications, but understanding. They know that if this moment ever comes, it cannot be rushed or forced. It must come from growth, not longing. This awareness slows them down in the right way. They are no longer chasing a feeling. They are preparing to meet a standard. And that standard was set by you without you ever demanding it. As evening approaches again, they feel a calm determination replacing confusion. They accept that whatever unfolds next will be shaped by truth, not fear. They understand that reaching out is not about expecting a response, but about honoring what was real. They are ready to face silence if it comes because silence is no longer their refuge. Growth is this shift changes how they carry themselves. Their thoughts become clearer. Their intentions become steadier. They are no longer trying to rewrite the past, they are choosing how they will show up in the present. And that choice feels empowering. Before the night settles, one final realization anchors itself firmly within them. You were not a lesson that ended when you walked away. You were a lesson that continued to unfold long after. Thinking about you today was not an interruption. It was an invitation. An invitation to become more honest, more present, and more courageous. Whether their path crosses yours again or not, your impact has already reshaped their direction. And as this truth settles into place, it becomes clear that the story is not finished. It is simply reaching the point where action can no longer be delayed. My beloved child, there comes a point where inner change becomes visible even before words are spoken. And they have reached that point. Now their posture shifts. Their tone with others changes. They are less reactive, less defensive, more present. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because truth has grounded them, thinking about you has refined their awareness. They now notice how shallow conversations feel, how empty distractions sound, how little patience they have for what lacks sincerity. This is not nostalgia. This is transformation. You did not pull them backward into memory. You pushed them forward into alignment. And that is why your presence in their thoughts today mattered so much more than they expected. As this clarity settles, they begin to release old narratives about themselves. The story where they were misunderstood, the story where timing was unfair. The story where circumstances were to blame. One by one, these narratives dissolve. In their place, responsibility takes root. They accept that they were afraid of being seen fully because being seen meant being accountable. You saw them fully. That was the difference. And now that level of awareness has become the benchmark they can no longer ignore. They understand that connection without courage is empty. They understand that love without action is incomplete. This understanding reshapes how they see every relationship in their life, not just the one with you. There is a quiet moment when they consider the possibility that you may never return. And surprisingly, this thought does not break them. It steadies them because they realize growth is not a bargaining tool. It is a responsibility. They no longer see self-improvement as a way to win you back. They see it as a way to honor what you awakened within them. This shift is crucial. It means their intentions are no longer, rooted in fear of loss, but in respect for truth. And that distinction changes everything. Whether paths cross again or not, they are no longer the same person who walked away. As night approaches once more, they feel something they have not felt in a long time. Integrity. Their thoughts, emotions, and intentions are finally aligned. There is no inner argument, no mental chaos, no emotional avoidance, just clarity. They understand that if they speak to you again, it will be from a place of calm honesty. Not urgency. If they remain silent, it will not be because they are hiding, but because they respect your journey as much as their own. This maturity did not come easily. It was earned through reflection, regret, and growth. And you were the catalyst for all of it. Before sleep finally arrives, one final truth rests peacefully within them. Thinking about you today was never meant to disturb your life. It was meant to correct theirs. You are the reminder of depth in a distracted world, of courage in a culture of avoidance, of truth in a time of performance. Whether or not they ever say your name out loud again, it will continue to guide their choices quietly. And as this chapter settles into place, it becomes clear that the impact you had was never temporary. It was foundational. Subscribe our channel for daily prayer prophetic.